Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I think we're actually just going to get going as we don't want to take up more than 30 minutes of your time. So as people pop in, we'll just let them in then. So hopefully you're having a lovely Wednesday. You've got your coffee or your early lunch, and yeah, I hope you enjoy it. So welcome back if you were here on our last one. Or hello if you're joining us for the first time. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Hannah. I'm from Armadillo Managed Services. I'm an account director here, and I've got Dan, my favourite CTO, who can introduce himself.
Hi everyone, yeah, so my name's Daniel. I'm CTO at Armadillo. Only been in this job a year, but I've worked in vendor, client, partner space, the lot.
Amazing. Thank you, Dan. So, excuse me, as you know, we like to address problems in our webinars rather than going in with a specific product or anything like that. So in our last webinar, we talked a lot about the importance of knowing what's in your network, discovering your endpoints. And now that we've gone and talked about how we discover these, we're going to talk today about the importance of patching and why this is still actually causing problems within organizations today. So should we dive straight in?
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. So obviously, like I just mentioned, last time we spoke a lot about IT hygiene, and obviously a big important part of that is patching and why patching is a critical part of security.
Right, so first question up. So I'd actually expand on that one, Hannah. Why is patching important? So it is a vital part of security, but I also extend that to platform maintenance, your general maintenance, as well as a lot of modern patches in products include new features. So why is it important? Well, if you think about the threat today, it's an always evolving threat. And if you think about how many lines of code are in all the applications, and then in your environment, how many applications you've got, how many servers, how many agents, and all that infrastructure. Well, all that complexity, and given human nature, there's a few things that can happen. You can get bugs, mistakes that are in the code. Okay, you can also get unintentional behavior, i.e. there's an outcome of the code base that was never actually by design. I think a lot of devs would call that a feature.
Yeah.
but it's something that might result in something that's exploitable or a vulnerability. So new threats arrive all the time, unforeseen use cases appear, and so why patching is so critical is it's all about making sure, it's about reducing risk. It's making sure that you are patched, you are up to date, in the same way that you service your car and you check the tires and the washer fluid levels and things. You should be checking your environment, your risk posture. You know, how many updates are outstanding, which ones are critical, and then being able to manage them and deploy them in order to improve uptime, improve the user experience, minimize crashes and bug checks on Windows and things like that. And also, as I said before, about closing those holes and those gaps in your security posture.
Great. So obviously we've named this webinar the patch management problem. So can we talk a little bit about what the sort of challenges that organizations are facing today with patching?
Certainly, yeah. So the challenges today, by and large, are actually the same as they've been for a few decades. What has changed is how devices are used. So patching has always been an issue. I can remember a time before when once you bought your computer, you never patched it. You just bought a new computer in 5, 10 years time, 15 years time, and that was how your system got updated. Or you went from Windows 3.1 to Windows 95 with a reinstall of the operating system, and then there was no change further. Now, what's happened is, of course, computers and internet connections have become far more ubiquitous, but also the way people use their devices has changed. So the patching solutions of old, the ones with the huge hierarchies, the extremely wide requirements, the distribution points and site servers and branch distribution points and management points, most patching solutions still maintain that same archaic kind of hierarchy. It's still not uncommon when I talk to customers where they have to send an email out to users on a Friday afternoon and say, please remember to reconnect your VPN so that we can patch your devices. Okay. And that sort of, when I think about it, there's no need for any of that to happen. Okay. Your patching solution should be adapting, or your endpoint management solution should adapt to the way the world is now. In this modern world where people work from home more than they go into the office. They might sit in Starbucks on a public Wi-Fi, or they're tethered to their phone in the airport waiting lounge, waiting to move. As an IT admin, you still need to have full visibility and control of those devices. You need to be completely apathetic to where they are, what they're doing. You need visibility and control of those. So the challenge is ultimately, in my opinion, are one of visibility and having access to those devices as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And obviously we've mentioned that there are some challenges within organizations. So that may mean that the patching isn't happening as regularly as it should, or they're not up to date with that patching. So if this is the case, what are the risks of not being up to date with patching?
So look, this is a good question. So I've met businesses that will sort of happily say, we don't bother doing patching and we've never had a problem. Okay, and in the at face value, you can't argue with that as well. Clearly nothing's wrong because the system's not being crashed and you're not being hacked. But then at the other end of the scale, you meet customers that will immediately patch every vulnerability or every critical security update that is released because of the risk of not acting. So the risk of not doing anything is, there's several parts to it. Well, first and foremost is the security one, which is the one that comes to mind most of all when you talk to people. It's if you don't close those holes and those vulnerabilities, if you don't eradicate those bugs, and close those security loopholes or holes in the software, then you are putting your business and your devices at risk. And that risk could be data leakage, it could be denial of service, it could be downtime. I mean, how much would it cost a business to lose their entire IT infrastructure for a day? It could be measured in millions. IBM said in their report last year that the average cost of recovery of a breach per server is $4.2 million.
Yeah.
Okay. And if you look at a lot of the modern exploits that have been released, or exploits rather, the vulnerabilities that have been uncovered and published in the last few years, I think almost every single one had a patch available before the announcement, but businesses were still being exploited because they were not rolling out these updates. And so the risk of not doing anything could be as severe as losing a business's entire data.
Yeah, so huge risks.
Potentially, yes.
Okay, amazing. So we talked a lot about the problem. Shall we have a little look at the solution?
Of course, yep. So let's dive straight in here. I could spend hours and hours talking about the use cases, and we could really patch in such an enormous topic. But what we're going to do, we're going to try and focus, rather than walk you through what the individual buttons and switches does and everything else. The key takeaway is one that I'm hopefully going to portray here, is one of visibility. Okay, it's having insight into the information that you've got. Someone once said to me, when I was talking to her quite a few years ago about, having reporting and everything on their infrastructure, and they said, look, gathering lots of data is great, but unless I can personally get value out of it, then it's worthless, and I'd rather not bother.
Yeah.
Okay, and what they were trying to say there was that every tool produces data and does reporting, but most times it's too hard to extract something of genuine value, and that's hopefully the point I'm going to try and address here.
I want to caveat as well, any questions as we go through this, please feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. And obviously, as Dan mentioned, it's very high level, so we are absolutely more than happy to dive deeper into this at a later date.
Of course, absolutely. So as with the last demo I did, once again, I'm going to use the Tanium platform.
Yeah.
So I won't dive into the entire platform, what it does, but it's an endpoint management tool that allows me to cover or manage centrally Windows, Mac, Linux, and many other devices and formats as well. So we're going to start off first of all, and I'm going to try and do this from an IT administrator perspective. So I'm going to ask a question. Right now in this moment, what patches are outstanding in my environment? And we're going to get that data come back immediately. It's my status of now. Now, this is the outstanding patches in the data here, but now what I want to do is I want to add in the computer name so I can actually get some valuable information coming back that shows me outstanding patches grouped by individual device. So I've instantly got a view of all the patches outstanding on 1600 machines. Now, with Tanium, I can dig deeper, so I can go into an asset register. So rather than just see a tabular screen of information, we can dig in here and now peek, or rather dig into the asset register. Whose machine is this? What applications? Where is it installed? And so we can build up this picture, this visibility point, and say, okay, this machine is not being patched, and I can start to understand why. Now, if we look over at the patching module, we look at the patching module there. The home screen gives me lots of information, lots of graphs as you'd expect. But as I scroll down, we can look at deployments. But a really cool thing, or really overlooked question, which I'm going to come to here, is this red piece. What would happen if I were to try to patch my environment right now? And that's what this screen is showing me. It's showing me that I've got a 28% gap in coverage, which means that if I try to deploy patches now, 464 machines would not patch. And I can dig in deeper, understand why. Is it the service isn't running? Is there a firewall rule that's causing an issue or something in advance? What's stopping me from getting a high patching success? And back to the patching screen. So now we've seen the machines. Now we can start building up that story of what's not going to patch. Let's look at how we would manage those patches. So it's a single pane of glass, centralized management, Windows, Mac, and Linux. I'm going to focus on Windows for a moment here. And if you've ever administered a WSUS server, you may recognize the similarities in this screen. The message here is one of the completeness. We can patch everything on the Windows estate using Tanium and that real-time data, and it can all be done in a really centralized and really fast way. Now, once we've got that management configured, here's what I call a bucket of patches. This is every patch in scope for my environment, and I might want to do it for just Windows 10. So so here's all the outstanding patches for my Windows environment, and I can scroll down. Perhaps I want to dig a bit deeper. I think I'm missing an 8. Let me just go put that back on the KB number. There we go. So we've now got this specific patch. This is a sniper patching scenario. I've got 8 endpoints which are missing this patch, and I've got the information, that visibility. Where is that patch missing? Where is it due? What's the data about that patch as well? Okay, so we could move to a deployment. So 3 clicks of a mouse is all it would take if I really wanted to, is to move that patch and deploy it to those 8 machines. But in a cyclical patching story, where it's say patch Tuesday to patch Tuesday, we would configure a patch list, and we can configure deployments as well. And at no point am I going to write any code or complex queries. It's all using plain English. So here I've got a patch list which says I want to install all security patches, all update rollups for version 14 and more and newer. And in the background, the system has already told me where those patches are applicable in real time, but then also which patches would get installed by this rule. And it's an interactive screen. Now, once I've got that patch list, I can configure a deployment. And a deployment is essentially it's the actual action. In this example here, I've got 299 patches applicable within this scope, and that is applicable to just 2 targeted endpoints. I can see that one of them has already finished the job, and the other one is in the process of downloading the patches. And you can see very high level here at the moment, but the deployment schedule. But something that's really cool that I'm going to call out here, the branding. I can entirely brand the user experience. I could put my corporate logo here. I could put multiple languages. I can set postponement options so the users can really have control of when the patches are installed or when the reboot occurs. And of course, as with everything, I could dig in deeper. Which is this machine which is downloading the patches? Let's go look at that data in real time, and let's understand, or let's have that visibility of what's going on. And then the final piece on this is the maintenance windows. Look, a patch Tuesday maintenance window here. Again, we build it up with simple rules, using a calendar and a clock to select it, and then where this maintenance window is enforced. It's very, very straightforward to do. But the real point I'm going to focus on now, sort of just to bring it to a close, what I didn't want to do is, as I said at the start, walk through all the different screens and this button does this function and so on.
Screen.
Exactly, yes. I wanted to talk about visibility. So this is the reporting section of the console. Okay, this gives me, all these charts are interactive and they are real-time data. So now I've got that instant view of every patching message or every patching graph that is relevant, historical compliance, patches, how long they've installed, the mean time to install my operating systems. But if you look at this, this is a demo lab, so it is intentionally unpatched. But look, I spotted something which wouldn't typically be surfaced in another patching tool. I can see here that I'm missing patches from 2018. I'm missing 46 of them. And I can interact with this graph drill down, find out which of those machines have got these missing patches, and then B, what are those patches, and then I can remediate it, sniper patching. Let's get that solved. Let's make sure the system is running the service, or let's check that everything's running, and then let's get those patches deployed. And then once that's happened, I can come back to this screen and then refresh it, and all of a sudden I've got an instant shift in data. And that's that visibility message, which is so overlooked in all the demos that vendors will do. They focus on the bells and whistles of the product rather than giving you, taking value from your data. So in the interest of time, I know we want to keep this into the 30 minutes. That's a bit of a whirlwind sort of tour. Hopefully it's been of some use, but I'm more than happy to go into more extensive demos at any time.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. That was an amazing high level for sure. And I think a few questions that have just come out of that as well is about sort of the number of machines that you'd normally find which are unpatched when you first look at this.
So it's an interesting question. So we offer, as a bit of a side note, we offer assessments where we do patching and vulnerability assessments and things like that. And so whenever we start an assessment with a customer or a prospective customer where we're looking at patching, I always ask them the same question: is what in your view, in your existing tooling, how good is your patch compliance? And you'll hear all sorts of answers. Some people sort of roll their eyes and say, "Oh, please don't ask that question." I would say, "Well, we get month on month 94.7% or something like that." What then we do is we deploy the Tanium agent in a read-only, in a passive mode, and we then do an audit, and we typically uncover a differential of about 10 to 15%. Now, what that really means is, depending on the size of your environment, that could equate to thousands of patches which you were just not missing. And the good example, back on that final screen I had open, where I spotted I had patches which are 5 years old. A lot of modern tooling, or not, sorry, a lot of existing tooling, you tend to group patches as I say, these are this month's patches that I'm going to roll out, and then I'm going to create a new deployment package for this is next month's patches. But what you don't always cater for is, what about a machine that's been in the cupboard for 6 months?
Mopping up the mess.
Exactly. It comes online, all of a sudden it skews your patching report. So I've never seen us not uncover more patches than what a customer previously had, and it can range between a few to several thousand.
And so how does this work if people want to patch across different devices, different networks, different locations?
So in the case of a tool like Tanium, obviously it's not the only patching solution out there, but we're talking about Tanium here. Tanium it will make you agnostic, or it allows you to be agnostic to the destination device. Now, what I mean by that is, you can have a single source of truth, or a single pane of glass, or whichever's the phrase of the flavor of the month here, is you can have this single data source of all of your endpoints. So that's Windows, Mac, Linux, physical, virtual, container, on-prem, off-prem, laptop, server, and so on and so on and so on. The list goes on and on and on. You can have that so you've now got a single view of everything, but you can also start having single configurations. So you can have a maintenance window which applies to all of your servers in data center A, Windows, Mac, or Linux, or whatever. You can have a patching configuration that applies as well. So rather than have to go to 3 different consoles to deploy patches, and 3 different maintenance window configurations, and 3 different patch lists, and 3 different reports, which then someone has the job at the end of the month of putting it all into Excel to stitch it all together, you've got a single view. So now it's and combined with the fact it's Tanium requires 0 on-premise infrastructure, you now get that visibility of everything across all of the operating systems, all the applications, all of the networks, working from home and everything else. You've got that, and now as the IT administrator, you can be entirely agnostic, because at the end of the day, your objective shouldn't have to change based on how and where those devices are connecting into your environment.
Thanks. That leads me on quite nicely to my last questions. We talked about, deploying across different networks, different devices, and obviously these patches can be deployed so easily with like 3 clicks of the button. But what happens if somebody wants to have a little bit more caution, and can they test these patches before they're deployed?
100%, yeah. So with Tanium, you could have complete patch automation if you wanted to, and then you can have varying degrees of that. So I see many customers that will have full patch automation of critical security updates, and these updates, they want them deployed immediately and to get them out there because of the nature of them. But you could scale that back in any way you want, or you could have the sort of traditional ring 1, ring 2, and ring 3 approach, where you start off very cautiously on a small test group, in inverted commas, of devices, and then you expand that out as a deployment, as your comfort with the deployment and the reliability of the patches improves. You can absolutely do that. And probably one thing it's remiss of me, I should have called out in a demo, is Tanium is, because it's real-time interaction with endpoints, it gives you quite the luxury with how you interact with them. So you could have full patching automation. You could have it staggering however you want. In a world where you might be doing automated patching, if you noticed a patch or an update, a configuration issue or compatibility issue, perhaps it's an update for a web browser, and you've just realized it's breaking one of your line of business apps, you can go straight to Tanium and hit the stop button, and stop really does mean stop. It's instant.
So you can stop that in real time, even if it's in the middle of the patch.
It will finish the patch that is installing in that moment in time, because otherwise it could break something if it tried to stop, but it would not do anything further. But actually, then the final point, which is really key here, is rollback. So you've got that same luxury of real-time control. You could now roll back those changes you've made in your environment. That specific KB number which caused an issue, you could uninstall it regardless of where those machines are, what they're doing, whether the user was notified or not. And having that level of control allows you to have more comfort in a much more automated approach. Given how common patching is these days, it really should be a task which is easy and digestible. You shouldn't have IT admins which spend a huge amount of time patching and debugging, and why didn't that patch install? Oh, it ran out of disk space and things like that.
Losing their weekends.
Yes, absolutely.
Brilliant, thanks. I think we'll leave the questions there, because I just want to come back to a point that you touched on earlier around our cyber risk assessment. So just Dan mentioned this earlier, we do offer this, and it is complimentary, and it's a great way to get an overview of where your assets lie, look at potential threats, but also can just be a validation that you're actually doing something right.
And actually, validation, that's a really key word. So there's a lot of vendors and partners offer assessments this and assessment that and so on, and they are all geared at selling something.
Yes.
And of course, at the end of the day, that's ultimately that's how business is. Our assessment, we don't offer it in that same vein. Okay, we offer it absolutely. We can go in, and there's some customers will go in and we'll run an assessment, and we'll say, okay, this is all the bad news, for want of a better phrase. These are all the patches and the vulnerabilities you're missing. These are all your alerts which you didn't triage and so on, because that could be useful information to build a business case for improvement. So you could take that information and then go to the board and say, okay, we need a better tool for software distribution or whatever. But the validation piece is important, because people are investing time and effort and money in improving their environment. So sometimes a third-party assessment is a great way of validating, that $500,000 that was just spent on Microsoft E5 is actually paying off, because now we've got better visibility, we've got better patching and improvements as well. Oh, and by the way, we've had it verified by a third party that it was a great thing to do as well. And that really is, that balance is what my technical team really try and strike when they're working on these assessments.
100%. So you can see my contact details up on the screen. So please do feel free to reach out if you want any more information, or you've thought of any further questions as Dan and I are talking through. I just want to highlight that our next webinar is actually going to be discussing the end-to-end software lifecycle management. So look out for more information on that coming soon. But I think just looking at the clock down, we'll probably wrap up on that for today.
I think we just fitted it in perfectly.
Yeah, you spoke well.
Thank you very much.
So thanks so much, everyone, for joining. Have an amazing rest of your week, and we'll pop this recording up soon, just in case you want to refresh or pop it onto any colleagues. But thanks so much, and take care.